Are we condemned to be free, condemned to define our free will through an increasing amount of alarmingly nonsensical reaction imagery, or is everything predetermined by sufficient reasoning and accumulated experiences? If a person is sufficiently hungry, a person will eat. If a game is sufficiently difficult, a Soulsborne player will get good. If a child is sufficiently young enough, a Minecraft YouTuber will What is choice exactly in Bastion? A relatively linear experience devoid of serendipitously colored moral choices and beautiful dialogue trees.
You fuck young boys, Valdez. Are you a madman?
Bastion is a 2011 isometric action RPG developed by Supergiant Games and designed by studio co-founder Amir Rao. In Bastion, you play as the Kid, a survivor of a mysterious calamity called The Calamity. Narrated by the smoothest voice this side of the old world, you awaken to a reality reduced to torn and floating islands, the remnants of the once proud city of Caelondia. You are quickly informed by your ever-present narrator-to-be that you will seek out the Bastion, the place to go when the world is reduced to aerial Great Pacific garbage patches and the people into microplastics. Astute players with only 2 monitors currently active will quickly notice the phrasing.
He gets up, sets off for the Bastion.
There is no question of choice. There is no mystique in directionality. You have, narratively speaking, no choice but to seek out the eponymous Bastion. Now, given the landscape afforded to you, there literally is only one way ahead, unless you fancy a Red Bull sponsorship, that is.
And then he falls to his death. I'm just fooling.
But more importantly, narrators often break the fourth wall. It would be appropriate for a narrator to be prescient of what the hero is to do, but as you find after arriving at the less than impressive Bastion Island, the narrator is not an incorporeal, omnipresent authority figure, but rather an old man called Rux, a Caelondian survivor of the Calamity. Creative director of Bastion, Greg Kasavin, explicitly states this on his blog as well. No breaking the fourth wall, and dialogue is for subtext only. Introducing and defining the narrator as an actual living part of the world establishes 2 things. 1. The narrator's real-time silky smooth drawl fills in the knowledge gap naturally arising from a game structured like Bastion. There is little to no text to read. Our protagonist, the Kid, is entirely without dialogue, and the only backstory afforded to us is delivered from the narrator's lips to your ears as the game progresses. The hammer you find is not a random, dilapidated construction hand tool, but an old friend. The Kid is not an out-of-place entity, but a survivor who knew the city, Caelondia, before it was destroyed. The Discord moderator honing in on the Kid for undeterminable reasons is not a product of the Calamity. They were present before the world went belly up and are as affected by the Calamity as everyone else. Not necessarily a malevolent force, but rather beings trying to survive the aftermath of the disaster. And 2, the narrator is diegetically a living, breathing individual, and therefore unreliable and biased. Rux is in many ways established as ever-present, accurately and dynamically commenting on the player's actions and progress. He speaks in present tense, as if he was nearby, maybe hiding in the bushes. This, in conjunction with the player's choice being solely reduced to which weapon to tread water with until you can find the pike and army carbine, makes the beginning of the game read much like a book. Everything as presented by Rux, at least, comes across as already set in stone. Country's gone, find the Bastion, find the core, and fix this whole mess. There is no narrative choice for the Kid. You progress linearly through the game, always accompanied by the dulcet tone of Rux, at least until the ending. But first, what is progress in Bastion? Bastion is a much more straight action game than RPG. GG. You gain levels, which increases your health points and unlocks more perk slots, in-game presented as alcoholic beverages. Beyond this, levels have little to no effect. You choose your weapon loadout, 2 weapons being allowed, as well as a special ability. I snidely called the choice between weapons a non-choice, but that was very unfair. I myself have a lot of fun with the boomstick, and maybe some Vietnam veterans will appreciate the flame bellows. The secret skill special ability can be quite fun, but as a fan of no fun, I recommend just using the one where you summon a blackened discharge to venereally infect your opponents. Not everything is available from the very beginning, however. As mentioned earlier, the Bastion isn't looking particularly good when you first arrive. This is where something called cores are central to Rox's plan. Plop the core you found on the first level into the center, and the Bastion slowly expands, allowing you to build and upgrade your base of operation. But what exactly is a core, and what exactly is the Bastion? This is where the narrator, being Rox, a living person present, is central to the narrative. The old man is not quite so forthcoming with information as a traditional narrator might have been. His belief in the Bastion is unwavering. That much he does make clear plenty of times. But the backstory is revealed piecemeal and carries the biased stench of someone who was simply too near of what happened to be able to provide an accurate, impartial account. At first, the calamity is simply something that occurred, but as we progress, more and more is revealed through the lens of Rox. After locating a few cores, we find our first survivor, Solf, who is specifically not a Ceylondian like the Kid or Rox, but a Jura ambassador. Ceylondia and the Jura was once at war decades ago during Rox's prime, and as if being a foreigner from a former enemy country is not bad enough to Rox, he starts vague posting about the cause of the calamity. The level we find Solf in is the Hanging Gardens, where folks went to relax from all their relaxing. Here the catastrophe that was the calamity truly hammers home the human cost. We've seen a few sporadic petrified Ceylondians in the first few levels. Whatever the calamity was, it worked instantaneously, freezing people in whatever activity they were doing as ash statues, ready to pulverize at the slightest of touch. In the Hanging Gardens, the dead greet the Kid with open arms. Countless statues stand frozen in time. Couples, old folks, kids. The calamity took them all, and Rox knew every single one of them.
Nordy the bird boy didn't make it. The Jawsons, they didn't make it. Grady Sr., Grady Jr., they didn't make it. But him, he survived.
The vitriol is palpable, like a soldier discussing the invaders of his homeland, a Rangers fan talking about a Celtic fan, or a Reddit moderator debating gainful employment. The whole Hanging Garden segment has no real combat or gameplay. It is clearly meant to show what was lost in the calamity, everything Ceylondia was before the disaster. You are forced to wander, or rather dodge roll through the visible human decimation, unfettered by any mental taxation of combat. When Rox puts the blame on Solf for all of this visual tragedy, it is complete pathos, but we have no other avenue of subtext and backstory but his narration. Rox doesn't even bother telling us his name before this point. We can choose to do proving grounds for all of our weapons, but all progression is at his call. He is the one plotting the starways after all. Then another survivor, Sia, a young woman and a Jura as well, bringing her stringed instrument alongside her father's hidebound journal. Sia wasn't born among the Jura like Solf, and unfortunately can't read her own father's journal. Neither can Rox, so the journal falls into Solf's hand, where everything comes to a head. Retrieving what should have been the last core, you return to the Bastion in quite a stage of disarray. It seems like Rox's misgivings about the Jura people came true. After reading Sia's father's diary, Zulf had a major crash out, destroying much of the Bastion and necessitating a course correction from Rox. Zulf was once an ambassador of peace between Caelondia and the Jura. He even found a Caelondian girl whom he proposed to, and on that happiest night of his life, got so plastered that he fell asleep in an underground war memorial that would end up serving as his unintended bomb shelter as the calamity happened. There is a reason why we found him looking so suited out of his mind. Rox also introduces Zulf in his narration as a true gentleman, so suffice to say that his crash out is very unexpected and something truly earth-shattering must have been hidden in the hidebound journal. The cores are not enough anymore. The kid must be cannonballed farther into the wilderness and gather something called shards. These crystal mummy looking collectibles are the poor man's cores. Their addition to Rox's collection should be enough to... what exactly? We're still not privy to the old man's plans, but further in our hunt for Rox's chakra shards, we come across a grand rail, jogging loose another memory from Rox. Rox still places the blame for the war on the Jura, but finally allows slip a teeny tiny little detail.
Okay, so maybe we didn't get their sign off on the whole grand rail thing. That was bad.
Quite the unilateral decision for Caelondia. With almost every needed shard in our possession, the Jura strikes at the Bastion, and with his plans for the Bastion ruined for the second time right before completion, Rox is forced to come clean. The calamity was no natural phenomena. It was a Caelondian Wunderwaffe meant to eradicate the Jura.
But part of that plan backfired, didn't it?
Understatement. Rox was there himself. He fought against the Jura by his own admission. He was the designer of the Bastion, but to his credit, he was not the one who designed the Calamity WMD. That was a Juran. CS father, in fact. He was press-ganged into designing the Juran final solution in what seems to be a major organizational oversight, and in what is most definitely a certified no-shit Sherlock moment. CS father sabotages the weapon which the Caelondians claimed was never to be used. There are only two surviving Caelondians, the kid and Rox. The kid has no voice, and so far has had little choice in progression. Rox is the only Caelondian perspective we hear throughout the entire game. And man, is that perspective chauvinistic. From everything we've heard from Rox so far, it was the fault of the Jura. The Jura started the war. The Jura are savage Untermensch, incapable of civil discourse and comprehending that this poor Caelondian grandfather just want the last few shards to complete his project. Never mind the Caelondian disregard of the Juran underground nation. Never mind that Jura refugees post-war were never allowed to return to their homeland. Never mind that Caelondia designed and activated a weapon meant to eradicate the entirety of the Juran people. In another timeline where the calamity worked as intended and only wiped out one nation, Rox is kicking back in a rocking chair somewhere, recording audiobooks from whoever is the Caelondian version of Tom Clancy. Would he have even cared about an entire people being wiped out? For Rox, the end always justifies the means. The only thing that matters is finishing his project, the Bastion. It takes a certain amount of arrogance or lack of empathy or cognitive dissonance to wonder why the Juran people, their homeland wiped out by the Caelondians, wouldn't just roll over and let the perpetrators do what they want. Even at the very end, in the very last level, Rox makes his only desire clear.
Caelondia will be whole again.
The same Caelondia that caused the calamity, by the way. By the end, we find Zulf beset by his own countrymen, angry that he led the kid to the ruins of their homeland. You can choose to fight and wipe out the last of the Juran, much like Rox believes you will, or you can break the cycle. With Zulf on your shoulder, you cannot dodge, you cannot shield, you cannot fight whatsoever. With the kid, the last fighting Caelondian in the world at their mercy, the Juran show their true nature. Through the entire game, we hear every justification possible from Rox. No excuse or introspection for what his people did and caused. He wants to use the Bastion to restore the world, travel back to a time before the calamity was caused, and make everything right.
All of this will just stop.
Why should we trust him? Saving Solf is the first real choice we've ever taken in the game, and clearly not the choice Rox would have taken. Our choice is rewarded by turning what Rox has established so far completely on its head. There was room for civil discussion after all, and the Jura would give up the shard without a fight. From the Juran perspective, Caelondia must be the ultimate aggressor, but even up to their knees in the debris of their destroyed homeland, they stay their hand and show mercy, allowing the last Caelondian fighter to leave with the last remnant of power for a purpose they can't possibly know. We see the Juran for the merciful people they truly are, but is this the Caelondian perspective? If time is rewound, Rox puts it best himself.
So you're probably wondering if the calamity happened already. What's to stop it from happening again after the Bastion does its thing? The answer is, I don't know.
Returning to the Bastion with Solf, we are given our second ever choice, and the final we'll ever take. Use the Bastion to restore the world and go back in time to before the calamity, or stay in our current timeline and use the Bastion to evacuate. We've seen the demeanor of the former Caelondians reflected clearly in our dear Rox. The Jura question will never leave their mind, their supremacy never in question. Even after everything that has happened, after learning the truth of the Caelondian weapon of mass destruction, he is adamant in restoration to the very end.
You can undo the calamity here and now. Go on, kid.
But restoration is a fatalistic condemnation, an eternal loop of national supremacy and preemptive mass destruction. The calamity weapon was called their last resort, but there is no reason given for why Caelondia deployed it. Either Rox doesn't know or is too ashamed to say. It is, however, easy to infer that it probably was no last resort. Solf, after all, was celebrating his proposal to his wife the night it happened, and Rox mentions no other war than the original one that happened way before. It could have only been the most cowardly of preemptive strikes, wiping out an entire nation you were not even at war with.
But when he reached out to her, she joined with all the ashes in the sky.
The Caelondian legacy. Would the same leaders be in charge of Caelondia once time is rewound? Why would we possibly think that the outcome would be any different in the next repeated cycle? If you do choose restoration, one of the last things Rox will say is,
maybe I'll see it in the next one.
And when you finally start your New Game Plus, the first thing you'll hear is the repeated,
I'll see you in the next one.
Before waking up to the same calamity, hints of deja vu in Rox's voice as you pass through the destruction yet again.
He sets foot inside one of Caelondia's famous watering holes. Inside's old Rondi, the bartender. He sets foot inside one of Caelondia's famous watering holes. Wait, haven't I? Anyway, Rondi's place just brings back memories. It was someone like him. Kid sees him there agape, in the flesh. It's a snag or two trying to get to him. Something so familiar about that man. It's a snag or two trying to get to him.
There is no free will. The Caelondians and Jura will always tango along the same path, and mutually assured destruction will always be the outcome. Every cycle, the kid will wonder where the girl with the crystal beret is, and every cycle, Solf will see his fiancée join with a million ash particles in the wind.
And so Zolf returned to where he proposed in the Hanging Gardens, and there he stood, as if the gods would answer him.
Now, detractors of this theory will say that New Game Plus is just as available for evacuation enjoyers as it is for restoration fans. Rox will also say, I'll see you in the next one, as you start a New Game Plus, regardless of which ending you picked, and the same deja vu dialogue will appear. But unfortunately, I have already depicted you as the Soyjak. In all seriousness, I do prefer the ambiguity. There is beauty in the rejection of fatalism or determinism, of a different timeline where Caelondia and the Eura aren't wiped out, where Rox did get to make everything right. It is important to note, however, that the "I'll see you in the next one" monologue only happens in the Restoration ending. The callback doesn't make any sense for an Evacuation New Game Plus, only narratively speaking for someone who picked Restoration. There is no objectively good or bad ending, no right or wrong in Bastion, rather a philosophical difference between the question of free will and a deterministic outcome. Are you willing to bet the entire future of Caelondia and the Eura on free will? What of Zulf and Sia? Sia says it herself.
Any moment I'd want to live again happened after the calamity, not before.
Sia has nothing waiting for her in the past, and Zulf has nothing waiting for him in the future. The different endings shows this very clearly. Rox of course wants restoration, but as we have established throughout the game, he is truly biased, too anchored in the past to make an impartial decision. Remember everything from the beginning of the game, his omissions, his obfuscation. He didn't even bother telling us his name. Even if we trust free will or chaos theory or whatever, how can Rox's judgment be trusted? What of moments like the Eura Mercy that would be lost in a time that would never be? To some degree, it is easier to sympathize with Sia's perspective. We never saw the Caelondian splendor, we only witnessed the aftermath of their cruelty. Even the kid never really saw it. He served on a wall for multiple years and saw no reward whatsoever for it. All the good moments that have come to pass, everything we witnessed, meeting Rox, Zulf, Sia, adopting creatures from the wild to our camp, seeing the Euron for their true quality of their people, would be lost. And indeed, this is why the ending in Bastion is so great. The branching timelines represented by Zulf and Sia cannot coexist simultaneously. The happiness of one of them must be sacrificed for the other's continuance. Without Zulf and Sia, the choice between restoration and evacuation is more abstract. Restoration seems a no-brainer. After all, allowing everyone to not be dead seems a good platform to run on. But enough subtext and pessimism would suggest that you are gambling with an endless cycle of distrust, war, distrust, calamity. As cruel as it seems to rip away Nordy the bird boy's chance at life and adulthood, maybe upgrading bird watching into map games instead, it would be just as cruel, if not crueler, condemning almost everyone to endlessly perish in mass destruction ad infinitum. The real repercussions of your choice is brought to a personal level by two tangible people in a symbolic representation. Zulf, happy with his fiancée, representing the past as it could have been at its very peak, and Sia, happy with the present and looking gladly into the future, leaving behind the shackles of the past violence and warfare. Rox himself ponders the choice as well, seemingly at odds with his coveted goal of restoration and a world where all the good things that have come to pass post-calamity still exist.
I'd like to say I'll never forget him, or what he's doing, what he's done. I surely would.
Also, in the evacuation ending, Rox is old and Zulf is depressed, leaving the kid, Yu, as the only viable bachelor for Sia. Now, I've seen the movie Passenger, Wikipedia plot synopsis, where Chris Pratt and J-Law are the only two awake on a space flight, and suffice to say, your chances of actually getting some action have never been higher than in this ending.
Never could ask for a song.
Compared to the Restoration ending, where you seem to be back to doing hard labor with your yee ass haircut. I rest my case.
Turn 'em round and round all you like. Pith's still gonna be ugly.
Alright, that was a video. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for equally biased takes on video games of every make and model. Analysis, essays, reviews. Have no clue what to call this. I just copy my favorite YouTubers because I love video games and I love talking about them. Leave a like, it helps the algorithm, I think. And leave a comment with any take on your mind. Comments are always my favorite thing to read. Support links down in the description, Patreon, yada yada. Now, I didn't talk a whole lot about the gameplay. It's always difficult to figure out how much I should be circulating the minutiae and practical elements of a game when analyzing or talking or essaying about a specific part of the game, the ending in this case. Gameplay isn't really all that central in that aspect, and you don't want to waffle on too much. I say as I prepare to absolutely waffle. But gameplay is very important in Bastion, in that it's truly what anchors this game in greatness. The two major reasons are, first of all, the gameplay is super tight and super fun. Obviously, that's great. Hot take that interactive mediums should have interactive, fun mechanics for sure, but more importantly is the replayability. I'm a massive Bastion fan, and gameplay is a massive reason for that. I'm a sucker for fast-paced dodge rolling, and what can I say, but the perfect playthrough in Bastion is obviously army carbine and shotgun first of all, but you do your first playthrough and pick restoration as your ending, and then you do your second playthrough and pick evacuation. Canonically, headcanon-wise, ending your time in the Bastion universe there. It makes perfect sense for me. And yes, I am a biased believer that the restoration perpetuates the calamity, but in terms of gameplay, if the gameplay sucked, why would you do New Game Plus? So the gameplay is important if you're a non-free will believer like me, but most importantly, combat being the main gameplay 99% of the game becomes really poignant at the ending. The entire pace and progression of the game is combat focused. There is no pacifist route, no meet us at the halfway routes. You only progress by bashing hapless wildlife and surviving Yura Viet Cong. By the very last levels, you receive a massive totem pole, which essentially renders the rest of the game easy mode. Now, I haven't played with all the modifiers on, only a meager 20% increase, so maybe the totem pole becomes a liability in that case. But for most people receiving the big freaking stick, you are now effectively god moding the remaining enemies until you meet Solf, being culturally enriched by his countrymen. If we take everything we've experienced, everything Rox has set into account, the only way to progress is combat. Every single map is combat. The core of the gameplay is combat, and you are now, with the totem pole, at peak combat. The weapon is a Wunderwaffe in of itself, so when you do choose to spare Solf and save him, insofar that's what you do, you buck everything the game, symbolically represented by Rox, has taught you. Everything so far was solved with combat. Everything Rox stood for was combat. The wildlife has to go, it's Demoros, time for civilized discussion with the Yura is over, and so on and so on. You break the cycle. In that moment you pick up Solf because you allow the Yura to show their true colors. Gameplay is important in its absence. The highlight, crescendo, climax of this action game is no action at all. All the violence that led to that moment is laid to rest. Alright, that's enough yapping for now. Leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe for more games to come.